Scream.
Yes.
This should do it.
10 essential 80s horror shows that are still scary. Horror shows have intrigued those looking for the frisson of fear since time immemorial. The excitement of a scary plot, a spooky atmosphere, and the tension through the episodes keep the fans engaged. Horror shows are nothing new, and even now we have so many popular shows entertaining the audiences. But a golden era for horror shows was the 80s. This was when the shows weren't afraid to be bold and nasty, and we had some absolute classics that charmed the fans, and these shows had a very long and successful run. In this video, we have assembled together some of the finest horror shows from the 80s. For those who have watched these, it has been a fascinating journey, and we are sure that these shows are very close to your hearts. So we decided to take you on this nostalgia trip, remembering these timeless classics. For those who haven't checked these out, it is high time you did, because they don't make such shows anymore. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Tales from the Darkside, 1983 to 1988. The American anthology TV series featured some of the best horror stories. The show was a grand success and enjoyed a long run for 4 seasons lasting over 4 years. The idea was conceived by George A. Romero, and every episode constituted of a short story that was usually accompanied by an unexpected twist at the end. These stories mostly bordered on the supernatural and explored horror in various forms. To make things even better, the show aired late at night when the ambience was perfect for these eerie stories. The show set up the atmosphere right from the opening sequence with the ominous intonations of Paul Sparrer, the prickly musical score, and the title card that would appear in dripping red colors. Although the main theme is horror, the stories sometimes dabble in science fiction and fantasy elements. This show featured some veteran actors and guest appearances. In one of the episodes, other prominent actors to have graced the screen for the show include the likes of Justine Bateman, Danny Aiello, Seth Green, and Christian Slater. Some stories like I'll Give You a Million are truly thought-provoking, while others like Trick or Treat inspire a few laughs at the cost of some dark humor. The special effects used were mostly sophomoric, but there was enough suspense in the plots to make you ignore the flaws. The show was so popular that it inspired a theatrical movie in 1990, but the film did not live up to the expectations. The Hitchhiker, a.k.a. Deadly Nightmares. This show was one of the ones where some fictional, paranormal stories are told by the character of the Hitchhiker. He would introduce and conclude every episode in a style that resembles the likes of Hitchcock or Rod Serling. The setting of the show was such that a young hitchhiker would introduce some characters who were about to experience some kind of paranormal incident. There was an element of revenge and sexuality in almost every episode. If a show makes Tales from the Crypt look mellow, then you know it has some hardcore content. The Hitchhiker does that with its unique stories where the main character almost always dies. The eerie theme music kicked off the proceedings, and then Paige Fletcher would play the perfect narrator, giving you the introduction and summing things up at the end. Prominent Hollywood stars like Gary Busey, Kirstie Alley, Harry Hamlin, and many others featured in this popular show. Legendary Billy B was a particularly interesting episode that told you the story of a nosy reporter, and some other episodes like Video Date enticed the audiences with divas like Shannon Tweed. There is an episode where a man thinks that his girlfriend is an escaped mental patient and then ends up getting killed by the real one. Such narratives are sure to leave you bewildered. There are strong violence and nudity in the episodes, and the show was certainly bold for its time. Those who have admired the brilliance of horror shows of the 80s swear by their nostalgic affection for this show. Monsters, 1988 to 1990. The title is actually suggestive of the content of this popular TV series. It was a horror anthology where a family of monsters would gather to watch some TV. The antagonists in the stories were often some form of monsters, and they varied from mutilated lab rats to animatronic puppets and terrorized the fans. However, amidst the serious tone of horror, comic elements were blended to make the show entertaining. The makers adapted stories of legendary authors like Robert Bloch, and it showed in the quality of the content. Among the producers of this show, Richard P. Rubenstein was also involved with Tales from the Darkside. Every episode in this series is a standalone tale and usually introduces a new monster every time. There were some famous celebrity appearances on the show, with Anne Mira, Laura Branigan, Deborah Harry, and others making their presence felt. Matt LeBlanc, who later went on to gain international recognition from his appearance in Friends, was also a part of one of the episodes. The very opening intro of the monster family gave everyone a creepy feeling. The premise of the show was somewhat borrowed from the Twilight Zone, and some of the stories were absolutely bizarre. For instance, one episode narrated the journey of a man who would feed his dates to his bed. The episode ends with him meeting a girl who feeds him to her refrigerator. Some other standout episodes included The Outpost and The Offering. Many of the episodes had substantial gruesome elements, but also had moments to inspire a few laughs. All horror fans must get a taste of this evergreen show.
Big deal!
Freddy's Nightmares, 1988 to 1990. Anyone who digs horror movies is familiar with the classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy's Nightmare involves the sinister serial killer from the movie Freddy Krueger, and he hosts this horror anthology show. In every episode, he brings to you the stories of evil and death and the lives of people living in Springwood. Using the traditional horror themes like a horrible childhood, dating, and cannibalism, the makers crafted some distinct nightmares that would spook the viewer. Freddy was an extremely popular horrifying character, especially with the success of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Despite the massive craze behind this show, it was canceled early, only after 44 episodes lasting 2 seasons. The issue was the violence and sexual content in the show, and when the makers reduced it for the second season, they also lost their charm with the stories. The odd timing for the show was also causing it to lose out on the fans. The show had some horrific tales catering to dating the wrong person. Another story was about a teenage boy who said, "I will love you forever" to the wrong girl and got stuck with her. Some plots were outright creepy, such as the one involving Jeffrey Combs, the man from Reanimator. This episode saw him play the role of a pizza merchant who had found a new secret ingredient. The show had guest appearances from Patty McCormick, George Lazenby, and many other prominent Hollywood stars. Even with the flaws, it is too good a series to miss out.
For ya. Drinks. One drinks. Toast. To our new house. My raise.
The Twilight Zone, 1985 to 1989. The show was an updated version of a popular TV series created by Rod Serling back in 1959. It was more like a modern reincarnation that stood on its own without relying on its predecessor. The Twilight Zone was an anthology show where every week brought you to a new story. These were uncanny tales that had a surprise twist in store for you. The stories often used some dark humor to mask the fear factor. After the original show proved to be a huge success, Rod Serling sold the rights to CBS, who were then empowered to bring about a revival of the show. They were a bit hesitant to resurrect the show as they were skeptical about the public acceptance, especially after the movie attempt by Steven Spielberg to pay a tribute to the original fell flat on its face. However, they finally decided to go ahead with the show and featured some prominent writers like George R.R. Martin, the man who later penned down Game of Thrones. The cast was rich with stars like Morgan Freeman, Bruce Willis, Martin Landau, and Fred Savage in the mix of things. There were some very popular episodes like Profiles in Silver, Her Pilgrim Soul, A Message from Charity, etc. Nightcrawlers was among the scariest episodes with a truly imaginative nightmare before your eyes. The best thing about the show was that despite the burden of expectations, it delivered the same sense of horror, dread, and irony-filled stories as the original series. For a TV show, the effects were top-notch and complemented the innovative plots. The later attempts to spawn this series were never as successful and suffered mainly from a poor budget. This one, however, is a must-watch for the horror fans. Friday the 13th, the series, 1987. Mickey is delighted when she inherits an antique store from her uncle. Little does she know that her uncle had struck a deal with the devil where he would sell cursed antiques in return for material wealth. Once she learned about the cursed antiques, she makes an effort to retrieve them and store them in a basement so that they could do no more damage. In her endeavor, she is joined by her magician partner and her cousin. Can they bring in all the cursed items? Initially, this show was called The 13th Hour, but the name was changed to draw the attention of the people as everyone associated the date with a paranormal significance. The idea to center the plot around retrieving the cursed items was a masterpiece. This way, the series could be extended or abruptly cut short as per demands. Considering the times, this show was particularly dark, and the only respite was the usually happy end to the episodes. Louise Raube, John D. LeMay, and Chris Wiggins formed a formidable cast for the show. The stories were innovative with plenty of horrors and on-screen gore. The internal continuity in the plot was amazing, and all it took was one episode to get hooked onto this show. The unfortunate end came for the show when several religious groups threatened a boycott, and the makers buckled under pressure. The replacement for John D. LeMay following his departure after the second season didn't please the viewers either. Till the time it lasted, this was a promising horror show and developed a loyal cult following among the fans. Tales from the Crypt, 1989 to 1996. This show is based on the controversial EC comic series and brings an anthology series constituting some gruesome stories. The host, Crypt Keeper, was a decomposing ghoul, and in every episode he would bring stories of the supernatural to haunt the viewer. It ranks among the few television shows that saw the participation of Hollywood A-listers like Tom Hanks, Malcolm McDowell, Christopher Reeve, and many others. The show was the brainchild of some famous directors in the film industry like Joel Silver and Richard Donner. Arnold Schwarzenegger directed one of the episodes as well. With great stories, hilarious puns, fearsome premises, and a brilliant host in John Cassier, this show offered complete entertainment. This was probably one of HBO's finest back in the day, and it was also instrumental in bringing about the famous tagline, "It's not TV, it's HBO." This is because HBO was free from broadcasting restrictions, and some racy footage from the show could be freely telecast for the viewers. Later, when Fox bought the show in 1994, the episodes had to be re-edited with alternate takes to omit the gore and nudity. Even ABC Network aired a Saturday morning cartoon show based on this, titled Tales from the Crypt Keeper. While this was a mellow version of the original show to cater to children, the viewers didn't approve of the content, and the attempt was a failure. The success of this show also resulted in a game show on CBS and a Christmas album, but none of these could live up to the expectations. Werewolf, 1987 to 1988. This gripping series is centered around a young man, Eric, who gets bitten by a werewolf. As his werewolf nature creeps in, he must stay clear of hurting innocent lives. To heal from the curse, he has to find and kill the founder of his werewolf clan. As he hunts for the evil clan leader, he has to ensure that he evades those who wish to kill him for his werewolf characteristics. Will young Eric successfully get rid of his curse? Some unique features of this show separate it from the usual horror-themed shows that aired during this time. People seem to find similarities with The Incredible Hulk or The Fugitive, but Werewolf is a show of its own with interesting stories and colorful characters. The struggle with Eric when he turns into a werewolf is beautifully captured by John J. York, who played this role. Unlike Hulk, who wouldn't kill innocent people, the werewolf Eric did kill a few despite trying hard not to. The special effects were remarkably good for the times and are almost movie quality. Besides the 28 episodes in the one season of this show, a 5-issue comic book adaptation was also created. Although the show was popular among the viewers, Fox, still in its early years, decided to cancel the run after a solitary season. For those who have watched this gem of a horror show, the fond memories of the Friday and Saturday nights are contents of delightful nostalgia.
So you've done it. You've really done it.
Darkroom, 1981 to 1982. Hosted by James Coburn, this horror anthology series was a gift to those who took interest in the paranormal tales. With every episode, a new cast and a new story would be brought to the viewer. The show consisted of 60-minute episodes that usually completed 2 to 3 short stories. Most stories had a surprising twist in the end to leave the viewer awed. This series takes a leaf out of the abundant slasher flicks in those times. Some of the stories, like Bishop of Battle, stand out for the unique ideas that drove the episodes. It starred Emilio Estevez and narrated the events of a video game coming to life. The likes of Billy Crystal, Helen Hunt, and Rue McClanahan also adorned this loved horror show. The screenwriter was none other than Robert Bloch, the author of Psycho. Some episodes were so dark and intense that even after filming them, they were deemed to be too intense for television. Later, these episodes were brought together to form the anthology film titled Nightmares. Partly due to the dark theme and partly due to the odd time slot, the show eventually fizzled out despite the fan following. However, it is still the perfect late night fare that the horror fans look for.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.
No way, baby.